Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. If you are new here, oh my goodness, welcome. Where have you been? It's always such a pleasure to have new listeners of the show. And if you're a regular, shout out to you because you are the reason why I keep doing this. And this is why the show keeps on growing. So thank you so much for tuning in. A gentle reminder that if you're not following on the social media platforms, please do. You can follow on Twitter and Instagram at Root of the Sci Pod or on the Facebook group at the Root of the Science podcast. You can also email the show if you want to be on a guest, you know somebody who you'd like to recommend, or just leave a review or leave me a little note at the Root of the Science pod at gmail.com. So please get in touch. It's always really good to hear from you. Now, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Remous Ocloo. He's from Ghana, but currently based in South Africa. He was inspired by his father and brother to enter the field of science. In fact, he specifically wanted to be a medical doctor. Unfortunately, that did not work out. Remous takes us on a journey of his academic career, detailing some of the highs and of course some of the lows. He discusses one particular setback which happened after he finished high school and also undergrad, which was sort of a setup for him to qualify for a prestigious scholarship, allowing him to study in South Africa for both his master's and PhD. Currently, Remous is a PhD student in medical microbiology. His research focuses on understanding how resistance develops and disseminates within and between human and animals through the food value chain, and how this can allow for new policies to mitigate antimicrobial resistance. Remous will tell us in detail the importance of this work and also touching on some of the important historical facts, which is really cool. Lastly, we discuss how he balances his work and personal life in order for him to perform at his peak to be the best scientist that he can. Tune in as we hear about all of this and of course so much more. Let's go. Hi, Remous. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne, for having me today on the show. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. So before we get things started, we have to introduce you. Rather, you have to introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah.
So can you just give us a brief overview? Who is Remous? Where are you originally from? Where are you currently based? And just briefly, what are you currently doing?
My name is Remous Ocloo. I'm 33 years, was born and raised in Ghana. I'm the last born of my family. I've been pampered, but not too much. I came to South Africa in 2017 to do my master's in medical microbiology under the Partnering for Health Professionals Training Program, which is a European Union funded project under the intra-ACP academic mobility scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So the aim of the program is to build capacity for health research professionals in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst in Ghana, I worked as a research assistant at the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research, which is one of the renowned research facilities in Africa. So yeah, basically that's who Remous is.
Wow, Remous. Wow, look at all that prestige. I'm so excited to talk about all of this later. but we will wait. We'll wait in anticipation. Before we get started into that and before we get into the sciences and everything that you do, you mentioned to me that you actually, not that you mentioned, you are part of so many extramural activities away from the science. You're part of student leadership, you have a very strong basis with your faith, you're a Christian, you have a wonderful YouTube channel with your wife, you love to cook, all of these things, right? And I know like with some scientists are like, how are you able to do all of these things very much? I'm like struggling. And they strike with striking a balance, with being a scientist and everything else. So for you, why is this so important that you are more than just this wonderful scientist that you are?
Yeah, so I think for me to be able to thrive in academia or in this PhD journey, there is a need to strike a balance in everything that you do. So I would always have fun after my lab work or after research and all that. And talking about cooking, I love cooking because growing up, as I said earlier, I'm the last born of the family, and all my siblings were older and getting married. So I had no choice to learn how to cook because mom was a busy woman. She wasn't going to stay around and do all the cooking for me all the time. So she taught me how to cook at a very early stage. And that is how I developed my love for cooking. And just cooking is very therapeutic. It's like doing biochemistry in the kitchen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's very therapeutic for me. Just bringing something out of nothing, just putting it together and then having the aroma and the how do you call it, the taste of the food is very therapeutic for me. And about the student leadership, I think I've always been that person who always wants to assist others. So coming around my department, I realized that I have to be part of the leadership board, and I spoke to my supervisors about it, and then they later appointed me to be part of the divisional meetings. And basically, my responsibility is to make sure that decisions taken at the board meetings are fair and favorable to the student body. Yeah. So.
Wow, that's really amazing. I love what you said initially when you said that it's good to kind of strike that balance, and for you to succeed in your academic fields, you need to have all of these other things, be it cooking or assisting other people. Speaking of cooking, we're chatting off air about food, and we have to bring it in quickly before we get into other things. But you're from Ghana, and as Ghanaians,
I'm from Ghana.
You are one of the, I feel I might get shot at for this, but of my opinion, one of the best in terms of just like cooking. I am very biased. I love Ghanaian food. So quickly, what is your like go-to meal? I'm like, listen, Remous, I'm coming to Stellenbosch. What are you gonna cook for me?
Okay, so if I'm having you around this weekend, what I would cook for you would be jollof and plantain. That is the go-to meal.
Oh, yes. Jollof rice.
Jollof and fried plantain. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Listen, you are making my mouth water just with that. So let's get back to the interview. You mentioned that you are the last born and, of your family. So bringing it back to the very beginning, young Remous, how does he get into sciences? Was it something that, you were influenced by others, your family, or was it something that just sort of happened for you?
Okay, so let me take it from the Christian perspective up until the PhD level.
Okay, sure.
So I grew up in a Christian home, and have seen all my siblings serve the Lord. And so I also have this passion for serving in church. And I think when I was in Ghana, I had the opportunity to serve as the youth secretary and the youth president for the youth ministry. And even during my undergrad, I was the trustee and prayer secretary for the youth. And that has generally made me who I am, and it has given me a lot of a lot of passion, and it has also nurtured me to become this type of person that I am, passionate and calm and responsible. But talking of family, my father was a teacher. He has retired now. And I remember that those days, while other kids were getting toys for their birthdays, he would get me storybooks.
It didn't make sense then, hey.
Yeah. He would get me storybooks or a Bible. And he was that person who believed that the greatest gift you can give a child is education. And I had a brother who went to Cambridge University. And before he left Ghana, those days he would come back from the university and he command get a lot of respect. Like everybody around him would respect him, and even the way he dresses very decently. And then I love that. So I knew that growing up, I wanted something like this for myself. And that is how I came to love science, because he was also a science student, and I just loved that about him. And I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be a decent person. I wanted to command respect. So that's how I come to love science. But I didn't want to become just a science student. Growing up, I wanted to become a medical doctor.
Okay.
And in grade school, I used to pass all my science subjects with distinctions. And I could even get 99% in science when I was in grade school. and that is how I knew that science was for me, because those marks I was getting were effortless. I could even close my eyes and answer all questions in science when I was in grade school. But the unfortunate happened when I entered high school. You know, high school teenagers, there's a lot of adrenaline. I was all over the place. I lose focus of everything. And when my final results came out, it wasn't very bad, but it wasn't good enough to get me into a medical school. But I wanted to still stay in the medical field. So the closest thing to medicine those days was biological science. So I had to do biological science during my undergrad. That was doing biological science. I noticed that I was passing medical microbiology effortlessly, and that is why I navigated towards medical microbiology.
I like how you were honest about the fact that, you know, as much as you were smart when you were in primary school, you know, because that's where the dream is always built. Hey, when we're younger, be it, like you said, for you, you saw your brother who was like, wow, the scientist, and commanded respect, etc. And then you're like, I want to be like him. But then sort of real life sorts of happen as you grow up.
Life happened.
The childlike wonders, you start to be like, oh, this, okay, clearly it's not as straight as you expected, you know. And even though you didn't get your desired dream, right, you still managed to be in the field. And it's quite interesting, because I'm sure you get this a lot when you tell people I'm doing a PhD, right? They're like, oh my goodness, Remous, you must be intelligent, you must be the smartest person you've always been. You've always been smart, and the journey was probably easy, you know. So take us through your academic journey, right? So you've told us that medicine didn't happen, but you took the slight detour. What happened after that before you get to where you are right now?
So I'm that one person that believes that anything that you do effortlessly is one of your passions. So even when I was in grade school, I navigated towards science because it was one of the subjects that I passed effortlessly. And then when I got to high school, that was when everything went sour for me, because I wasn't focused enough. And I realized that even though I wasn't very good, or I wasn't performing, I was doing best in biology. So there I realized that no, I have to go towards biology. And even though I could have changed my course in high school, because high school nothing was happening, I wasn't failing, but I wasn't getting good marks. So I could have changed everything about biology, medicine, but I decided to still stick to biology because it was one of the courses that I was passing effortlessly. And when I entered into undergrad, I made sure that, okay, let me tell you this. During my undergrad, this was what happened. I went to, because I didn't pass with good marks, I went to one of the universities that was considered in Ghana a low level university, or university for students which were not up to a higher level. So, and one of the things that happened to me there, which I think is a testimony, is that because the university was not one of the best, there were not so many facilities. We didn't have so many facilities. There were no clubbings. There was nothing happening around. So the only thing you could do on campus was to go to church and study. so that was a major breakthrough, even though it was a disappointment because it wasn't the best university. The situation around the university made me to focus, and I passed all my courses. I passed all my subjects excellently, and then I graduated with a very high GPA, and that was what made me got the scholarship to come study in South Africa.
Wow, what, this is just one of those things where it might look like one of the, okay, how do I say this? It's like one of those things where it looks like a denial or like punishment, but in fact, it was more of like a setup. It was like, I think that's what failure, inverted commas, is. Hey, where you put in a situation where if you had looked at it in a situation where, okay, you know what, it's done, I'm at this not so well university, this is all that I'm gonna be, but you kind of use that to your advantage. So I mean, wow, look at that. So it allowed you to get a better opportunity for yourself, right?
And I always tell myself and my friends that if I had gone to the premier university in Ghana, I don't think I would have been here, because with the kind of energy and character I was taking from high school to university, if I had gone to the premier university, I would have been clubbing and chasing girls and all that, and I wouldn't have been where I am today. So I think going to that university was a blessing to me.
Wow, that just gives me goosebumps, and I hope for somebody who feels like wherever they currently are is like a moment of failure, they are sort of inspired to look at it as like how can this, or what lesson can this teach you, and how can you better yourself up from that? So kudos to you for that. Okay, so you excelled, and you were able to get this wonderful opportunity, the one with the EU or the European Union, right? For those who don't know. So now you are currently doing your PhD at the University of Stellenbosch, also one of the premier universities in Africa. So look at you shine now. Look at you shining now in medical microbiology. Your research focuses on understanding how resistance develops and disseminates within and between humans and animals through the food chain, and how this can inform new strategies and policies to mitigate antimicrobial resistance. Again, this was a bit of a mouthful, but I know you're going to explain it better. Can you just give us an overview on what your research is all about for us, given what I just read out?
So I think I would want to take it from the beginning.
Sure. Yes.
Let's what are antibiotics? One can say that antibiotics are drugs used to treat bacterial infections. So the key word there is bacterial infection, and it means that when you take antibiotics for viral infections such as common cold, flu, measles, it wouldn't work for you, right? So let's take notice of that. Antibiotics are used for treating bacterial infection. Antibiotics were actually discovered by Egyptians. I hope you know that, right?
No, I didn't. That's interesting. Okay.
This is the story behind antibiotics. In those days, the Egyptians would use moldy bread to put on their wounds or their injuries.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't know, but the mold on the bread has antibacterial properties, which heals the wound. But these days, we give all the glory to Alexander Fleming because he was the one who discovered the component which was in the mold.
Penicillin.
So this was, yes, the penicillin. So this was what happened. One day, Alexander Fleming came home. So he cultured staphylococcus on a petri dish and he incubated it. So he left, went home, and when he came back, he realized that there was mold or fungi, as we scientists call it, growing on the plate. And then he noticed that where the fungi or the mold was growing, there was no bacteria growing in that region. And that was the breakthrough. So he began to study what was in the mold that was causing the bacteria not to grow around it. And that was how penicillin was discovered. And penicillin is actually from the name of the mold or the fungi, which is called penicillium. And yeah, that was how penicillin was discovered. So in those days, penicillin wasn't available to the public. But during his Nobel Prize speech in 1945, he said something very significant, and I will quote him now. He said, "The time may come when penicillin can be bought by anyone in the shops. Then there is the danger that ignorant man may easily underdose himself, and by exposing these microbes to non-lethal quantities of the drug and make them resistant." And that is the challenge we are having now. People are abusing antibiotics, and these bacteria or these microorganisms are becoming resistant. Do you know that antibiotic resistance was directly responsible for an estimated 1.2 million deaths worldwide in 2019?
Wow, I didn't.
And so we call it the silent pandemic. Antibiotic resistance kills more than anything, but nobody really speaks about it because we can't actually quantify it since it doesn't happen suddenly. So we call it the silent pandemic. And this is the problem we are facing currently. People are abusing antibiotics, which is leading to antibiotic resistance. And there's another thing that most people don't know, that only 30% of antibiotics produced in the world are used in humans. So where do you think the rest of the 70% goes to?
Animals.
The rest of the 70% goes to agriculture, to be specific, animals.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is where my research comes in.
Wow.
To be able to understand antibiotic resistance, you know that human beings are in frequent interaction with animals. So to be able to understand how antibiotic resistance spreads, we need to also describe what is known about antibiotic resistance in animals. And over the years, you would see that studies focus only on clinical settings. So you would see studies doing research in antibiotic resistance in hospitals. You would see studies doing antibiotic resistance in humans in the community. And then you would see studies doing antibiotic resistance in animals. But there is no actual study which has brought these three settings together to actually understand the flow of antibiotic resistant bacteria from maybe human beings in the community to animals, or from animals to human beings, and then human beings eventually bringing it into hospitals. There's no study which has done that in Africa. So that is what I hope to achieve. And I choose staphylococci or staphylococcus because the most common staphylococcus species that we know is Staphylococcus aureus, which is a very dangerous microorganism. It affects a lot of, it infects a lot of people, and it's responsible for infections such as sepsis, bacteremia, cellulitis, and all that. So I choose it because it's one of the significant bacteria when it comes to infections in humans. So my aim is that I want to use this approach, which we call the One Health, to bring these three settings under one umbrella. So I'm looking at antibiotic resistance in animals. I'm looking at antibiotic resistance in healthy people in the community. And I'm also looking at antibiotic resistance in sick people at the hospital. So I want to know the staphylococci organisms in the animals. Is that the same staphylococci organism in healthy humans in the community? And is that the same in the hospital setting? So by doing that, we will be able to know the flow of transmission, and we will be able to come up with a policy to regulate the use of antibiotics in animal production as well. Because as of now, there is no laid down regulation of how much of antibiotics can be given to animals and the quality. So that is what I hope to achieve with my study.
Wow, that's so interesting, Remous, and also so very applicable, especially with people where we've noted that, the type of food, especially our meats, has all of these different things that are injected to it. And now we are learning that one of them is this antibiotics, which is 70%, which is just mind blowing to me.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah. I didn't quite know. And also what we consume, we are, like you are literally explaining to us that are we really, that's saying, are we really what we are, what we eat? And your study will basically be able to show that. And when you said that when you are able to kind of track the flows of the antibiotics, then this is when the policies will come in to say that you're only allowed to put in X amount. Is that exactly what you're saying, with my understanding?
So what happens is that normally, to be able to come up with a policy, you need data. So we call it, you have to do a kind of a surveillance to see the kind of antibiotic that the animals are used to. Then we can say that there is too much use of probably maybe penicillin in animal production. So maybe there should be a check with that. And another thing is to see the mechanism that the bacteria is using to fight against the penicillin. And that could also give us an idea of the next antibiotic that the bacteria in the animal can be resistant to. Because, the mechanism with which the bacteria becomes resistant, they can use that same mechanism to become resistant to another antibiotic in the same class.
Okay.
Do you understand? Yeah. So we have different classes of antibiotics. We have beta-lactams. We have beta-lactams are the penicillins and methicillins, and then we have how do you call it? The macrolides, which are erythromycin and all that. So when bacteria become resistant to an antibiotic in a particular class, there is a tendency that it's resistant to all the antibiotic in that particular class.
Wow, this
Yes.
is
Yes.
this is so
So
interesting.
yeah. So when we understand the mechanism, then we can say that it's probably due to the use of this particular class of antibiotic in the animal. So therefore, it needs to be regulated, it needs to be checked. And also maybe the people who are working with the animals, if the same organism is seen in the workers and the same organism is being seen in the animals, then we can also say that there is a transmission. We call it zoonotic transmission from the animal to the workers or from the workers to the animal. So we can also come up with a policy to say that PPEs must be enforced when working with animals to prevent this from happening.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, Remous, this is such an interesting study and such important research. And I honestly wish you all of the best as you conduct this. I'm sure it's not, of course, easy because you're working with people and you're working in the lab. So those those have got you know those have got its good and its drawbacks. So
yes. I remember the beginning of the month, I had to go for sampling of animals, and it was a big difficult because how do you tell animals to stay for you to take a sample?
Exactly.
So it's challenging. The workers had to come in to hold the animals for me to take the sample and all that. It's challenging, but yeah, we are getting there.
No, I'm glad. And speaking of sampling and just going out into field work, you obviously doing a PhD, and just doing a PhD, like I said, now it's got its own good and bad and some tough moments. But you are pursuing this PhD, during a pandemic, which sometimes you forget because you've been in here for 2 years. And with the research, I don't think the people who are doing their PhDs or any of their research at whatever level, they don't forget, because there's some challenges that people in the past did not face. So for you, how have you managed, to control all of the chaos that's been happening in the outside world, and also just not letting it affect you and your mental health as you could go on and do your research?
So let me tell you a bit of a story. Being an international student is not very easy. It's very challenging. I remember that when I came into South Africa, that was my very first travel out of Ghana. So I was very new to the whole international student experience. I haven't been anywhere before, and this was my first travel. And coming here, I don't know anybody around, and I was always lonely. And where I was staying, there was literally nobody around. Like, all the students would lock themselves inside and all that. So it became so overwhelming. And one thing I decided to do was that I wanted to go to gym. So immediately I joined the gym, and it has really helped me a lot. Sometimes when I go to the lab and things didn't work out, I just go to the gym and release my stress on those metals. So up until COVID hit, I was very passionate about gym. I always go to gym and make sure that I build myself physically and mentally. And also, one of the things that helped me a lot was that I always make sure that whatever happens in the office or in the lab stays in the lab. I don't stress myself too much over it. And because this is what I believe. If it is called research for a reason, if we knew what we were finding, they wouldn't call it search.
Yes.
Yes. So it's called research for a reason. You don't know what it is you are looking for. So don't stress yourself over it. Just make sure that you do the right thing and always try to find answers. But whatever happens in the lab, in the office, in class, let it stay over there. And that is what I believe, and that is what I always work towards.
Yeah. Oh no, that's true. I like that. But if we knew the answers, you wouldn't be searching for it. So
yeah.
it's so obvious, but in those moments of like frustration, it's like, why don't I know this? So you've pointed out something so important, so important. And Remous, as we are closing up, and you sharing your story and some of the lessons that you've learned while we are on this path, can you then give us some of your golden nuggets, apart from it being research and leaving it in the lab? But what are some things or that you've learned that have helped you get to where you are, be it in terms of science or just everyday life in general, that you can share with the audience listening?
So what I can say is that you don't have to be smart to do PhD. You just have to be resilient.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm the excellent or the nerdy type of student. I'm just an average student, but I think I got here by determination. I've been on more than 3 scholarships already, and I think I got here by determination. So whatever we want to achieve, we can achieve if we put our mind to it. So everybody under the sound of my voice who wants to achieve something, who wants to go and do PhD, whatever it is you want to do, if you are passionate about it and you put in the work, it is achievable.
Yes.
And also, I would like to add that we talked a lot about antibiotic resistance. One thing we need to know is that antibiotic resistance is real. Let us all make sure that when we go to the doctor and we are given antibiotics, after taking them for some time and we feel all right and fit, we should not put them down. We have to finish the course. It is very important, because if you do not finish the course, then you are breeding antibiotic resistant bacteria in your system, and that could cause you in the near future. So it is important that we finish the course, even when we are fit and we are feeling fine after few pills or after taking few of the drugs. Let us make sure finish the course.
Wow. Thank you for that, Remous. And especially the last part about the antibiotics. I did not know that, and I'm sure others didn't know. So that's very important medical advice that I think we all need to take note of, that that's one of the ways that this resistance can happen. And even with your words of wisdom that you shared, you always, I've mentioned this previously for somebody who's not new to the show, where my supervisor, he always says to me about how a PhD is not about how smart you are. It's just how resilient, how do you persevere, how do you keep going? And I think that can also be applied to just success in everyday life.
Yeah, in general.
Yeah. it's not only in terms, because people sometimes look at somebody and they're like, oh my goodness, you're so successful, you're doing this, but it's like they just, life will throw you off, but it's just how many times you keep getting up and up and up. And with your story as well was also another wonderful story of how you used your perseverance and that obviously to come back up and to succeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our chat with you today and for you just sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to share my story, and I hope that the audience will learn something from today's podcast.
For sure, for sure. And to everybody else who's tuned in, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time, goodbye.